This week in Torah, we begin a new book of Torah, the book of Shemot, Exodus. The book of Exodus we begin this week. Shemot in Hebrew means names, the book of names. The beginning of an epic narrative here in these times. Thank God we as a people live in this narrative, because how we need them now. These past weeks leading up to it, we've been in the book of Genesis and Bereshit, with the beginnings of creation and the stories of our ancestors and their families and their calls from the divine and from each other, with all the beauty and all the failings and all the wrestling that it brought. And now very quickly we enter a whole new story. A story that is the formative narrative of our collective as the Jewish people, a whole new reality. The first lines of Shemot, of Exodus, begin, these are the names, Shemot, these are the names of the sons of Jacob who came to Egypt with Jacob. And it lists each of them and the total number of persons that came to issue were 70. Joseph had already been in Egypt. Joseph died and all of his brothers in that generation. But the Israelites were fruitful and prolific, multiplied and increased greatly, and the land was filled with them. A new king, a new Pharaoh rose up over Egypt who did not know Joseph and said to his people, look, this people, look, these Israelite people, they're much too numerous. Let us deal shrewdly with them so they may not increase. Let's get rid of them so they won't join our enemies and fight against us. And bam, just like that, within just a few verses, very quickly, it's a whole new story in Mitzrayim, the narrow place. This first parsha, this first set of readings from the book of Exodus, so much happens so quickly. Moses is a baby, Moses killing the Egyptian, the burning bush, Moses coming back to Pharaoh for the first time, the beginning of the plagues, all of this in this parsha. There are so many rich teachings in this parsha, this challenging journey, this beginnings of the journey. In fact, it's the archetype of the challenging journey for us. I want to open the door wide in this parsha tonight with a meaningful repetition of a word that comes up over and over again, that leads us, that asks us, that invites us in. It is our practice in the Jewish tradition to take just one verse and sometimes just one word and open it wide and step inside, or dive inside and see what are all the things that it has to teach us. What's the wisdom inside of this place right here? So tonight, this word in this parsha is a verb. You know how we love our verbs. A verb for everything, for God, for everything. Ra'ah. The word that brings us so much and eventually leads us to the burning bush, ra'ah. To see, to look at, to inspect, to consider, to have vision, to regard, to look after, to see after, to learn about, to observe, to watch, to look upon, to look out, to find out, to give attention to discern, to distinguish, all inside of Resh Aleph Hey, Ra'ah. This verb comes up again and again in key moments of this parsha. When Moses was born, and to protect him from death, from the edict of all Hebrew boy babies being put to death, his mother put him in the water, his sister followed after him. And Pharaoh's daughter, Ra'ah, perceived, took in, looked upon, considered, paid attention to this baby, and took baby Moses out of the water. When Moses sees the beating of the Hebrew slave, Ra'ah, I see it, I take it in, I consider it. This changes me, changes everything. And then And then here in this moment of the burning bush that burns and is not consumed, the encounter with the divine. A messenger of God appears to him in a blazing fire out of a bush that is on fire but not consumed. Moses says, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight, the Erev from Ra'ah. Why is this bush not burning up? And when God saw that Moses had done this, when God saw that Moses entered into Ra'ah, God called out to him out of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. And he answered, Hineni, here I am. And God said, do not come any closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for this place on which you stand is holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses. This is holy ground. And what begins this encounter? It's a willingness to see, a willingness to take in. Not visual seeing. Full considering, discerning, observing, willing to take in. It's because Moses did this that God speaks to Moses through and into him. Our commentator Sforno says that it's in this moment, the willingness to stop and turn and look, that Moses' self reaches up, and at that very moment, the divine reaches into Moses. We must stop, turn, take in. This is the first step in this divine encounter, to take it in. We're changed when we're willing to be present, to take it in. The burning bush, so many fires right now, so much burning, that we need to be willing to stop and take in. What is it right now? To see, to perceive, to consider, to encounter, to pay attention to in our lives and the lives of those we love, in our community, in this world where there is such fire, such suffering. In our lives in this land where we live, it's the Gregorian calendar, a new year. Although we continue with the unfolding of 5784, you might have heard that it's also 2024. And there is this emphasis on the possibility, the newness of what can be. It's a new year. What is it going to bring? What is it going to be? What it could be starts right here with a willingness to take in what is. A willingness to take in what is right in front of us. Friends, this is hard. I don't want to be saying this as if, oh, how easy. Let's just take in everything that's going on. It's so easy. It's not easy. Honest, layered, real realities of those we love. The honest realities of those around us. It is hard to take in. I also want to give you permission to occasionally not take it in. You know I have to say that. There are moments for distraction. There are moments for just mindless distraction. I just watched Physical 100, but we can talk about that if anybody saw that Korean reality show. Moments of distraction. And then we must return to this baseline presence, this willingness to take it in. At my house last week, we read the newspaper, it turns out. At our house, we read it every day, paper. And on Sundays, we get the LA Times every day, and on Sunday, we get the New York Times. And we read it every day. And on this past Sunday, I came out, and I was looking for the paper. You know, the Sunday Times takes me several days to read. So I read it in sections through about Thursday. And But I always like to read the front page on the day of, right? It's the front page. It's Sunday. Let's look for it. And I was looking everywhere. I was turning all things up, and where is it? It turned out my beloved Brian had hid it. He had hid the newspaper from me. He said, it's too much. There's an article in here that's just too much. I read it. I can't get those images out of my mind. And I don't want you to have to see that. An act of loving did find the paper. And just saying that, you can probably hear in my voice that I recall what was being described. It was awful. In his hiding it, though, it did give me an opportunity to think about it and to choose to read it and to know that I could stop. There are so many fires, and they require our attention, and it is desperately important that we bear witness. And I know that it is so overwhelming right now. Here in our streets, the loss of Carl on the steps of our building, Bernice in our neighborhood in the cold last week. COVID continues. There are people still in the hospital. The incredible suffering in Israel, the incredible suffering in Gaza, the incredible suffering in Ukraine and Sudan. I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Reverend Victor, but I saw you and I was thinking about how when we had that gathering, that interfaith gathering shortly after October 7th, closed door for us to process. And we were talking about what was happening. And we were deep in it as Jews. There was primarily Jews and Muslims, but some of our Christian brothers and sisters were there as well. And you said, wow, this is powerful to listen to all of you. And I want to share with you that we have many human beings that are living surrounding the church who are suffering every day. There is so much. So what happens in this moment? We are asked to stop. Not just turn and look. Don't come any further. Pause here, Moses. Take your shoes off. What do we do in those moments when we're taking something in? What do each of us do when we're reading the thing that we know we'll never forget? What would it be to pause and take your shoes off? I mean, you could actually take your shoes off, and I invite you to do so. Some sort of ritual of stopping inside of it. This holy moment of an encounter with someone suffering. Maybe taking your shoes off is stopping, not scrolling to the next thing, not running out the door. Maybe it's saying to somebody, hey, I just read this, or I heard this, or somebody told me this. Can I please talk with you about it? This is holy. This is holy ground. We need to stay in it together. And have a moment. Taking your shoes off slows us down. To be in it together. It opens up a makom. And that's the word used. This sacred space, this holy space. One of our names for God, makom. Ha-makom. A sacred space. Often we're able to open up that holy place of listening and taking in and ra'ah with people who we feel connected to, who we have some connection to. And it's harder to take it in with others, to avoid it or explain it away. I heard about a book, and it blew me away, so I had to get it right away. It's called Against Empathy. Yale professor Paul Bloom wrote a book, Against Empathy. I thought, are you kidding me? Like so much of who I am and my spiritual practice, it's an empathy-based practice. How could somebody be against empathy? And I just want to raise this up because it's so important. He makes the case that we are likely to have empathy for those who are like us, who we have some connection to, and not to have empathy for others, or to seek out hearing those stories. Bloom makes the case that some of the worst decisions made by individuals and nations, who to give money to, when to go to war, how to respond to climate change, who to imprison, are often motivated by honest, but not always clear in the empathy. There is possible bias in our empathy. Amen? Yes, there is. And many of you have shared about the bias that you have seen and experienced in spaces. So one of the questions when we're stopping and taking in, what are we taking in? Are there stories we're not hearing, avoiding? Avoiding because they're like us, or I want to put out the possibility, avoiding because they're too much like us. What does it mean to honestly take in? And can we notice what we're avoiding, who we're not hearing, what we're not hearing? As we've said again and again, what we're seeking is compassion. And compassion is empathy plus action. And that is the third and last piece in this encounter. Ra'ah, Moses, turn and see, take your shoes off. And now God says, I have something for you to do. There is something for you to do. There is action for you to take. Stop, take it in, pause, take your shoes off, take this in. Open our hearts, as overwhelming as it is, to the suffering that is real, and then act. That's what we're being asked to do right now. Take it in, acknowledge how heavy it is, and then act. And as you well know, Moses feels very comfortable with acting in this moment. No, Moses repeatedly tries to get out of this. Absolutely not. It's not me, it's not me. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I'm God, I'm telling you. And I'm telling you I'll be with you. Still no. Still no. Over and over this exchange happens. God even shows signs and wonders. No, I still don't think it's me. I have this speech impediment. It's not me. It is you, Moses. Who else could it be? Open adoption, knows both. Pharaoh's family, his family, is exactly who it's supposed to be. There's nobody better set for this than Moses. Finally, God says to Moses, you'll go with your brother Aaron. Your brother Aaron will help speak for you, and then it opens, friends, because again and again is the teaching in Torah in our lives. Moses, you do not have to do this alone. Moses, we're not doing anything alone. And Moses says, yes. In our taking it in our pausing, in our acting, we are doing this together. And if you think back just in this parsha, already Moses was not alone. Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives, Pharaoh's daughter taking Moses out of the river, Miriam, who continues to help and care for him, Aaron, his brother. None of this is alone, Moses. The whole journey of the Exodus is to find each other. May you see, may you take in, consider, discern, be affected by what you have right in front of you, right where you are. May you know in doing so that you are on holy ground. And from there, may you act. May you act. May we all know that the actions are many. There are so many actions that we can take in listening, in giving, in advocating, and on and on and on. May you take it in. May you stand on whole new ground, holy ground. May you act, and may we all find each other. Shabbat shalom.
There are those in dark corners who don't see the paint without the light. There are many fine sculptors, not enough hand holders. Someone in the family is missing from the photograph, but we smile in the moment we're framed. It looks like some of us have risen up, but the weight of it all is all too much for the few who learn to swim. There are many who have not been touched by the river of love. There's beauty around me I can see, but the sun has always shone for me. I've been loved since my conception, but the river of love has made exceptions. And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it but a lullaby to help me sleep? I am a lonely for the lonely. Some part of me thinks I should never smile. And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it? And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it? And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it but a product of my own tears? Makes it a little easier for me to turn away into the ground in a box just big enough to hold me, waiting for a voice that's brave enough to scold me. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground. And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it? And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it? And if my song doesn't inspire me to move, then what is it